Hey guys, Brian Stevens here with Mortgage Shots of the National Real Estate Post. It is near the end of the year, and a lot of you are thinking about making a move. You want to talk to our team over here at the CB team in the Loan Factory. We do things that are just wildly different, including crowdsourcing, which we'll be doing today, talking about and sharing ideas and strategies and technologies amongst peers inside and outside of our company that will help you close more transactions, get closer to deals. Reach out to me. Just call me at this number over here. Send me a text, and let's have a conversation, a very discreet one. Now, we got Christmas right around the corner. I hope you guys are having a wonderful holiday season. I know it's like super stressful for a lot of people. Got to be honest with you. Don't have two of my three kids with me. It's a little bit different this year. Nevertheless, the show must go on, and we have a pretty interesting story that we want to share with you today as it pertains to housing. So stick with me and tell me what you think in the comments down below, and make sure that you share this if you like it. Because I don't know. I think you guys might find this a little bit more illuminating, a little like Christmassy than maybe we hoped on Christmas Eve or the day before. Let's jump right into it. Oh, goodness. Why is it blowing this thing out? Hang tight with me, guys. I just have to reconfigure again. All right. It's irritating. Okay. Let's jump right into housing this Christmas season, and some of the things that I think have gone wrong and some of the things that would actually go right. Of course, this is all armchair quarterbacking it from years past and the direction we're at right now. So, 1 year change in home prices. The national 50 largest metro areas between 2024 of November to 2025. You can see the national aggregate right there in the middle. Is this telling you anything in the direction the housing market is going to go? Again, I've been talking about this, and we're not doing it again today. But we are seeing a shift where the market is actually taking control of what's taking place in real estate and lending. We've had so many policymakers come in trying to fix things, trying to correct things. A lot of it has to do with COVID and the massive influx of money we had at that time, but it goes all the way back prior to 2008. We're looking at a veritable 20 years of history of bad policies that led us to this exact point that we're at right now. And we continue to make changes, and I have been screaming at the top of my lungs that the changes that we're making right now are not going to impact housing in a significant way that's going to bring affordability back, all the while holding on to the equity that people have. And nobody is talking about this in Washington because it's not politically expedient. It doesn't make sense to say, yeah, I'm going to build a whole bunch of new houses right now, because if you do that, you're going to drive the prices of all housing down. And if you drive the prices of all housing down, every single media outlet in the country is going to say Americans have lost trillions of dollars. And if it was done on your watch as a politician, your ass is going to get voted out. So nobody is truly addressing the housing epidemic we have for fear of personal loss. So our policymakers and our elected politicians continue making changes that on paper might sound good to you, but as I've been telling you, have absolutely no effect whatsoever of significance in the long or even sometimes in the short term. And what I've always been telling you is that, hey, listen, the market is going to eventually come and correct itself, and that's what we're seeing right now. But I ran across a video from President Trump. Now, I want you to take however you feel about President Trump and put it aside. You might love the guy, you might hate the guy. I doubt you're just okay with him. It's probably love or hate. But the truth of the matter is he addressed the problem head on. But here's what he did. He actually acknowledged the fact that there's really no fixing this that's going to make everybody happy. However, in very Trump fashion, he's going to find a way to do it. But again, they're at odds, as even he says. So check this video out and tell me what you think.
On housing, you talked in your address last night about housing.
Yeah.
Are you still considering a national emergency over housing?
I'm looking at it.
What would that look like? What would that mobilize?
You know, there's two thoughts on housing. You have a lot of people have housing that because we have such a strong time and such a strong market there,
True.
houses are very valuable. It's a
True.
big part of their net worth, their house.
True.
I don't want to knock those numbers down because I want them to continue to have a big value for the house. At the same time, I want to make it possible for young people out there and other people to buy housing. In a way, they're at conflict. In other words, you create a lot of housing all of a sudden and it drives the housing prices down. So I want to take care of the people that have houses that have a value to the house that they never thought possible, that have sort of made them wealthy and happy, and especially in their later years. Got to be careful with that. I want to keep them up. At the same time, I want to make it possible for people to go buy houses. Daniel?
Okay, so did you guys get that? President Trump wants to keep your equity in your property and not jeopardize that, but also create an opportunity for people to buy houses so they could realize the American dream like the first-time home buyer. Well, if we create a lot of housing for first-time home buyers, they're not going to buy your overpriced house. And if they don't buy your overpriced house and you need to sell it, you're going to have to drop the price and you're going to set new comps in your community. Not to mention, these new houses that the president's talking about building, they're going to be used as comps for anybody getting a house, or getting a loan on any house, previously owned or not. In other words, you can't have both. It doesn't work. So we either keep unaffordability at its height, at its peak where we're at right now, and housing unattainable for those who would like to buy housing but don't have it, or we don't build housing and everybody gets to keep all this crazy equity and we bid for fewer homes at higher prices. So he did acknowledge the problem and he's working on a solution, but guys, there really is only one solution. But hold on. I did find a second solution. Now, if we drop rates, they just bid all prices up. That ain't going to work, so rates really aren't the issue, right? We can't change policies. We could make it cheaper to build houses, but that means we get more cheaper houses, or builders keep the prices high. That ain't going to work. The only solution is to saturate the market and drive the price of all homes down. That's it. Or is there another solution? Get a load of this. First of all, before we do that, this is an example of policies that we've had in place now for the past 20 years. And we always assume that affordability in housing is going to come through the Federal Reserve. And as I've told you for the past week, the Fed has shot all their bullets. There's nothing they can do. In fact, as I said yesterday, the last time the Fed dropped interest rates was just a couple of days ago. When they did that, rates actually went up. And for the week that the Fed lowered interest rates, home purchases actually dropped. In other words, the Fed used one of the bullets that they believed they had, and the exact opposite happened as what was intended. What should that tell you? The Federal Reserve is not a place for solutions. In fact, the Federal Reserve is a place where, maybe it's a little bit strong here, but the American dream was stolen. If we go all the way back to Ben Bernanke back in 2008, 9, and 10, the era of the first meltdown, we went into quantitative easing to drop interest rates. What does quantitative easing do? It prints money. It puts more money into circulation. We buy mortgage-backed securities. It drops rates, but quantitative easing creates inflation. It devalues the rest of your money for everything else you spend, including buying a house. Sure, you could drop the rates, but if you just bid the prices up, the houses just cost you more money. In other words, each dollar that you spend on purchasing a house gives you less spending power, making the houses more expensive and less attainable. After Ben Bernanke, we had Janet Yellen come in, and she did the exact same thing. Quantitative easing to the tune of $177 billion, following the broken lead of Ben Bernanke that created the problem in the first place. So what do you do if you have a bad idea that is making housing more expensive, that gives the illusion via lower interest rates that things are getting better? You double down on a bad idea. And that is precisely what Janet Yellen did. More quantitative easing created more inflation. The problem gets even worse. So then Jerome Powell comes in. He's been here under Democrats and Republicans. Now housing is wildly unaffordable. 70% of Americans, based on a couple of recent studies that have been done, are living below the poverty line as it was written in the year 1965. I want their standards of living, not my standards of living today. So what does Jerome Powell do? He follows the same bad lead of Janet Yellen, who followed the same bad lead of Ben Bernanke, and he went into quantitative easing, and he more than doubled what Ben Bernanke and Janet Yellen both did, creating the inflation bubble that we see and feel today. Bad policy after bad policy after really bad policy. And what are we still talking about here, guys, today, right now, as I shoot this, just before Christmas in 2025? More freaking rates and quantitative easing. Why are we talking about this? We're talking about this because nobody wants to address the real problem as Trump did. Well, I want to give the American dream to people so they can afford a house, but I want you to be able to hold on to your equity. It doesn't work like that. It never will. In short, guys, interest rates are neither the problem or the solution. It's all inventory, and something has to give. This is why and where I'm talking about the market is in the midst of correcting itself as we're seeing prices drop for only the third time in the past 50 years. This is happening in spite of all the ridiculous policies that have taken place. Here is a Federal Reserve map of quantitative easing as it pertains to the Federal Reserve. You see those massive jumps, 1, 2, and 3. We've showed this graph before. In the blue line, well, the higher the blue line goes, it gets filled with the red, and the red becomes inflation. So quantitative easing drops interest rates, it creates inflation, and houses get more expensive, and your dollar spends less not only on houses, but on apples and oranges and turkeys for your Christmas dinner and everything in between, including those smaller packages underneath your much more expensive Christmas tree. Does it make sense? So these are the problems that we have right now. The solution is building more houses. So Brian, you said you have another solution in front of you. How about this one? If you want to afford a home, quit buying boomer homes and quit using boomer money. Quit buying boomer homes and quit using boomer money. Now, I know this is kind of unrealistic for most people, but I just want you to look at the history of this. The boomer homes, which have created this whole damn mess, who control approximately 70% of all equity, the $7 trillion in equity we have, is by baby boomers. Okay? They've created the unaffordability that we see today. And when I say quit using boomer money, because it's not worth as much as it used to be based on the policies that that generation has created. Now, I'm kind of tongue-in-cheek in this thing a little bit. Of course, it's not the baby boomers. They're along for the ride. I get it. But you see, there is an alternative to baby boomer money. And I thought this was kind of, again, funny on the eve of Christmas here. But if we quit using their money and dealing with inflation and money manipulation, which is precisely what the Federal Reserve does, and we just leave it alone to the market. What if the Fed never interjected and printed money and pulled money back and hired rates and lowered rates arbitrarily based on the whims of a bunch of people on the board who've never had a job? And look it up, none of them have had a job, yet they're setting all of our monetary policy, and can't help but notice they are all baby boomers. If we just let the market alone dictate the value of money, if there was no interference whatsoever, and what does it come down to? Well, let's look at some alternatives to money. What about Bitcoin? Oh, Brian, Bitcoin's ridiculous. Of course it is, because it goes up and down crazy, doesn't it? Yeah, just kind of like our money. But look at this. If you were to buy a house in 2016, it would have cost you, your average house would have cost you $288,000 or 664 Bitcoin, okay? If you were to buy that same house in 2020, it goes up to $329,000, okay? It's an increase of over $40,000, but your Bitcoin a currency that's left alone and the market determines the value, you don't have to spend 664 Bitcoin on it. You can spend 45 Bitcoin on it. Houses are actually getting cheaper, not more expensive, if you're not manipulating the currency. And if we go all the way over to 2024, that very same house that you spent $288,000 on in 2016, in 2024, with manipulated US dollar currencies, you're going to spend $434,700. That's going to be over $150,000 more. That's inflation, guys. That's your inflation. But if you look at Bitcoin in 2024, you only need to spend 6.6 Bitcoins. In other words, your manipulated boomer currency almost triples the value of that house, or the cost of that house. And in Bitcoin, it only costs a fraction of what you would have spent in 2016. So am I arguing to go put your all of your money into cryptocurrency? Of course not. That's not where I'm going with this. Not at all. But what this really does kind of illustrate is how influential the Fed and our policy is in mucking up the waters when it comes to housing. This is on full display because sure, there's manipulation that goes into cryptocurrencies. Of course there is. And there's cryptocurrencies that are more stable than other ones. And yes, people are going to go in there and they've made movies about it. I get it. I follow it. But we don't have the calculated manipulation of the Federal Reserve of the United States government now, do we? And look at what they've done to housing. It's gotten wildly more expensive. In the same inflationary market that we're all suffering from because we're using US dollars, had you had Bitcoin, and of course it would make everything different. I've got this in a vacuum. But look at the cost of that house. They become wildly more affordable. The only thing I'm suggesting is going into this next year, we have to look not only at housing, but all the periphery industries that go ahead and influence housing and our ability to afford, inside or outside of Bitcoin or US dollars, the most expensive component of your life. And that's where you're going to rest your head at night. So as you sit in your house and you're looking around with your fire and your family and whatever it is that you're doing, just make it a point next year to keep your eyes wide open and look at all the alternatives that we have on the table to make the 2026 and beyond housing markets a hell of a lot better than they are today.